Hello my Fireflies and welcome back to the Cyan Firefly. It's me Lyiat here with the TLDR on Bioshock Infinite by Irrational Games. Now this is a new format for the TLDR show. I am basically just freeforming this with a couple of cliff notes. So please do let me know what you think of the new format in the comments below and tell me whether or not you want me to return to the old show. So, Bioshock Infinite is, as I said, made by Irrational Games. They are the guys who made the original Bioshock, System Shock 2, and Tribe's Vengeance. They are a very well-known company. Bioshock 2, however, was made by 2K Marin, who are known for making the XCOM FPS. Now, 2K has had a hand in this game as well, but is primary Irrational Games. So you will see a lot of things from Bioshock Infinite that invoke feelings of Bioshock 1, and it does differ slightly from Bioshock 2. Granted, they're all very similar games, but this is primarily from the guys who made Bioshock 1. So, personally, I like it a little bit more than I like Bioshock 2, which I never actually finished. So, moving on. What is Bioshock Infinite all about? Well, it is the story of Booker DeWitt and Elizabeth. Now, what happens here is that Booker has a couple of debts to some people you really do not want to have debts to. And as a result, they hire him to go to Colombia, which is a very interesting place that Booker has never heard of before. So Booker goes out into the middle of well, I can't say the middle of the ocean, it's actually kind of off the coast of Maine. And he gets into this little pod and gets catapulted up into the air to Columbia, which is a city in the sky. He is there, of course, to look for Elizabeth, basically kidnap her and bring her back to her his debtors. I'm gonna keep on making gender disagreements throughout this entire video, aren't I? Great. Anyway. So, a couple of key things to keep in mind here is that Columbia is a very interesting futuristic city, and unlike the previous games, you are actually exploring Columbia in its heyday, before anything bad happens to it, unlike Rapture, where you are actually taking a look at it in a post-apocalyptic world. So you actually get to see all these really cool sights. You get to see the city in its full glory, which is very significantly different from the previous two games. I actually welcome the change. I think it's very refreshing. However, because it's a Bioshock game, things eventually do go to hell, and you do actually get to see the city slowly crumbling around you, and you also get to see that things weren't exactly the way you might have thought when you first arrived. For instance, you get to go through the slums, and you can see that it's not exactly the peachy, fun-loving, all-American community that you might have thought it was. Or perhaps it is, if you actually know anything about history. However, moving on, let's move on to the gameplay, shall we? So, the gameplay I pretty much split into a couple of different categories. First of all, talking about the gunplay, there is a wide variety of guns in the game. It's actually quite massive. There are tons of different types of weapons, machine guns, shotguns, all sorts of fun little stuff. And there always seem to be two different versions of every single gun, except for the crank gun, but that's its own thing entirely. So what do I exactly mean by that? Well, for instance, they have these color identifications. So if you pick up a machine gun, it has a blue icon in the background and it looks like a machine gun. It's a fully automatic gun. It's very fast, it does quite a bit of damage in a short amount of time. Now you can pick up a gun that looks pretty much exactly like it. It's called the burst gun. This one has a red icon, it's got a slower fire rate, but it does a little bit more damage per shot and it's more accurate. So the difference between the two different types of guns are just, they're kind of like side grades. It's whatever you prefer. Now, every single gun in the game can be upgraded. You do have to change the upgrades between the two different types, so an upgrade for the machine gun will not upgrade the burst gun. Same goes with every single other gun in the game. The volley gun and the rockets, the volley gun and the I don't remember anymore. So, yes, there are upgrades. I am kind of disappointed in the fact that the upgrades are not permanent. Actually, that's not the word I should be using here. The upgrades do not have a visual component to them. You know how in Bioshock 1, when you were playing through the game, whenever you upgraded one of your guns, it caught a really cool visual change to it. That doesn't happen this time around. And that's because of how they changed how guns work. Your guns are temporary things. You do not actually keep any gun throughout the entire game. Every time you get a gun, you can only hold a maximum of 2 guns, first off. And then you can swap out for any gun you find in the environment. So if you kill a guy, you liked his gun, you can pick up that gun and start using it. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm more leaning towards the negative. It is different in its... You know, maybe it's time for something to change in the Bioshock universe. It is the 3rd game, but I don't know. I really dislike the whole movement from the old style of games where you basically became a Swiss Army knife of death, capable of holding multiple types of rocket launchers, a Gatling gun, 3 different rifles, a shotgun, and 2 different pistols. I used to love that when I was a kid, and moving to this whole 2-gun system that's toted around by the MMS style of things, it annoys the hell out of me. Otherwise, gunplay feels really good. All the guns are very interesting, they have very nice sound assets, and they all feel very effective. There is no real... You don't feel the need to stick to one gun throughout the entire game. They all feel useful. Moving on to Vigors. Now, Vigors are what replaced plasmids for this game. This game actually takes place before the first 2 Bioshocks, so they kind of had to change things around because plasmids don't exist yet. So, Vigors are... They're pretty cool. I like how they implemented them. Instead of the old system, Vigors are now entirely aggressive. They are all weapons. You do not gain the passive Vigors that were in the previous game. They are all active weapons. You can use them in any way you want as long as it's, you know, fighting. You don't get, like, increased punching. You don't get something that allows you to shock everybody around you. That's actually kind of been replaced by gear. That's a whole separate thing. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. Again, you can upgrade your Vigors, you can make them do different effects. So, say with a Fire Vigor, Devil's Kiss, you can upgrade it so that it splits into a bunch of bombs. It's really cool. There's one that allows you to shock people. You can upgrade it so it chains to more people. You can upgrade the Crow one, that when you hit people with it and you kill those people, it leaves behind traps that will chain to more people. It's really awesome. As far as the feel goes, they are all really cool looking. The art assets for it are really nice, and again, all the Vigors feel useful. You will want to play with all of these. They are delicious toys, and I absolutely loved it, and eventually you will move into the build that you want to play with for, you know, say you want to do shock and awe, you want to stick with electricity and fire, and you will eventually find a way to, you know, what guns you want to use and what gear you want to wear with it, and what will give you the maximum effectiveness for shock and awe. Not to say that's actually like a combination or anything, that's just kind of what I called it. Finally, with Vigors, you kind of have this thing called infusions, which I say are kind of like Vigors, kind of like not. They're a little bit more like the passive plasmids from the previous game, but basically all they are is these things that you can find in the environment. It's up to you to find them. You cannot buy them. But what they are is a flat upgrade to either health, your salts, which is your mana in this game. It's kind of like the Atom of the previous game. And then your shield, which is this passive magnetic shield. It's kind of like recharging health. It's kind of how they balanced health from their previous games, health that you had to recover, with the regenerating health in new games. So it's a nice happy medium. Alright, moving on to Riffs, which is the brand new mechanic. There is absolutely nothing like it in the previous Bioshock games. Riffs are basically these things that Elizabeth can use. You can see these little glowing things in the air, and if you look at them, you can see something that Elizabeth can draw in from another universe. And she can draw it into your universe, and it can interact with your universe. It's kind of a play on the whole many worlds theory, and it has a very big tie into the story that I am not going to spoil for you guys. So it's really big. So she can call in things like cover, she can call in things like weapons or turrets that can help you. You don't have you don't actually have a choice on the particular spot. Like, this particular spot will be cover, and it's always going to be cover. You can't choose that. However, instead of drawing in that cover, you can go to another rift on some other part of the area, and you could summon in a rocket turret instead. And Elizabeth can only have one of these in existence in a time, so it's a very tactical choice, right? It's a very tactical thing that you have to actively consider. And it's a very neat mechanic. I really love how this works in the game, and I have loved fooling around with it and spawning all sorts of fun little stuff in to give people hell. I remember one point actually summoning in a pool of water under a bunch of people and then hurling a lightning bolt into it and shocking them all to hell. It was amazing. They also now have optional objectives, which are slightly different from what they were in the previous game. Optional objectives to the past two Bioshocks were really just restricted to tracking down little sisters and either killing them or rescuing them. In this, it's kinda changed around. Optional objectives now are basically you find something in the stage and you need to look for something else to go for it. It's either a key or a code book or multiple different things. And you really have to look out for these, because if you miss them, they're done. You can't ever go back to a stage to revisit it and deal with the things that you missed. Speaking of which, that's kind of a negative thing in my standpoint, and it's something I really disliked about Bioshock 2 as well. In the first game, you could always backtrack to any area and revisit it and deal with anything that you missed. You can't do that in Bioshock 2 and Bioshock Infinite. It is a thing I have always really disagreed with. And storyline-wise, it makes kind of sense. And I can't exactly tell you why. You will have to play the game in order to find that out, but it has to do with the riffs, and that's all I will say. But it's kind of really disappointing that if I miss something and I later found out that I missed something, that I can never go back and remedy that. The final thing I want to talk about gameplay-wise is the sky rail, which is... You get this little grinder on your wrist that you can use, and it can be used as a melee weapon, yes, but its primary use is actually a form of transportation. You can find these rails that are all across pretty much every single stage in the game, and you can use your rail thing to jump up on top of it and fly around, and you follow this railway track at a very high speed, and you can fight people on it, you can shoot people, you can dive down and hit them with your grinder, and it's a really cool, visceral experience. Hell, you can even fight people while on it, and there are some unique mechanics to that. Like, people can electrify it, which can hurl you off, and all sorts of... It's awesome. I love the sky rail system. It is something I haven't really seen before in any other Bioshock game, and I really love that they put it in there. And it also gives you this really cool feeling of just flying through the air, because you're going over vast open spaces, and... It's cool. It's really cool. I have plenty of footage of it, so you guys will actually be able to take a look at the video and know exactly what I'm talking about. So, moving to my feelings on the storyline. The storyline is absolutely bonkers. I can't talk about too much, but I can give you some general stuff. Columbia is a very... what's the word I want to look for? It's a very... right-wing, conservative, early, pre-World War I American city, but it's up in the sky. It's very religious, and it's also very pro-white. Now, what do I exactly mean by that? This is something I'm not entirely sure that a lot of our foreign viewers are going to know when they pop into this game. Prior to, you know, the 60s, we were very, very mean to anybody who was not white. It was actually really bad here in America, especially prior to World War I. Hell, even prior to World War II, really. World War II is when sentiment kind of started changing in America. But prior to World War I, and in fact for a long time after World War I, we had these things called the Jim Crow laws, which segregated the blacks horribly. We basically made them a racial caste that was below anybody else, and we did not treat the Chinese very much better. Not to mention, we were also very misogynistic, and we were also very anti-Asian. We treated Chinese people very horribly. They were given these really, really nasty manual labor laws, and Bioshock does a great job of actually displaying that. They approach these social issues and display them accurately. I accidentally hit the microphone. But they display them very accurately, and it's done in such a cool way. I mean, some people are going to be offended. They're going to say, you know, America was never like that. But in actuality, we really were. We were jerks. But enough about that. Just to say, I think this game is worth playing just to see that. Just to see the historical side of things and the way that they demonstrate that in the game. And yes, they do go a little far with it in some places. It's not always the case. Like, it's not a 100% accurate representation, but, you know, the stuff like no Irish here, colored bathrooms, that stuff did exist. There you go. The main character is pretty cool. The kind of stuff that he has to deal with is pretty interesting. They actually made Booker DeWitt into a character this time around. He can speak, he can have conversations, he has feelings. He is not just this mute character you put yourself into. And it kind of gives the story a whole new dynamic feeling. And they also play up this thing called the False Shepherd. One of the first things you encounter when you come to Columbia is the false shepherd shall leave the lamb astray. Now, the lamb, of course, being Elizabeth, and you eventually find out that the mark of the false shepherd is this brand that's going to be on the false shepherd's right hand, which is this AD. Now, Booker has that mark on his hand, and it completely throws him for a loop. How could they possibly know this sort of thing? Am I the false shepherd? And you find out pretty damn quick that you actually are the false shepherd according to their prophecy. And the entire storyline kind of has to deal with you being the shepherd that was seen in the prophecy and how you interact with the prophecy of the prophet Zachary Cornstalk. And Zachary's a very interesting character himself. I can't go too much into him without giving major plot spoilers, but all I can say is, god damn, the way that they twisted him into the plotline is insane. Elizabeth, however, is also a very, very interesting character. She is the lamb. She is the one who can bring in the riffs from other worlds. She is the key to everything in the storyline. And all I can really tell you guys about her, other than the fact that she is a very, very solid character, she has some very realistic emotions, and I love the way that she looks, the way that she acts, and everything. When you look at Elizabeth and they talk about her, the question that should be in your mind is not who, it is what. It is not where, but when. So think about that for a little bit, and that is how convoluted this plot gets. It is astounding. I actually adore every single character in this game for everything that they are. The twins I will talk about for just a moment. There are these two twins that you constantly run into throughout the entire game. Booker has no idea who they really are, but they are a very mysterious force that I would kind of compare to the Q. But that's all I'm going to say about them. they are very interesting, very humorous, and keep an eye out for everything that they do. So, that's about it, I guess I have to say. I really enjoyed this game. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I have to fully recommend anybody who wants to play this game, pick it up. I can safely say that you will enjoy Bioshock Infinite quite a bit, especially if you enjoyed the previous two games. Yes, it takes a couple of movements away from the original Bioshock, but it's still something very, very worthy of the series. I enjoyed it a hell of a lot, changes and all. I kind of wish some things had been different, don't get me wrong, but that's with any game. Any game I ever play, I always think, well, maybe if it was this way, it might have been a little better. But you know what? I didn't design the game. Either way, pick up Bioshock Infinite if you were on the fence about it. Play it and have a blast. Irrational Games has done it again. The plotline is just as intense as Bioshock 1. It has just as crazy twists and turns. I'd even argue that they are even more crazy this time around. However, for now, this has been Lyiat with the Cyan Firefly, jumping through rifts in time and completely losing my brain. I will catch you next time, Fireflies. See you later.